Greetings! Welcome once more to the Dracovin Empire. Are you ready to dive back into the world of Golarion? The setting for the Pathfinder role-playing game system. We're going to be introducing you to an interesting character today. An ancient being who is still alive in Golarion today. Sorshen, the Runelord of Lust. Yes, we're going to be heading to New Thassilon and visiting her. But if you're ready to do such things... Check. I can lead us there. Through a gate I can open up. Your host and guide here, Candace Magic Dracovin. only get that here. Take my hand. Remember to give a little bit of a tip here, like, subscribe, ring the bell, and let me know what you think of Sorshen, or what have you experienced of her and your experiences in Pathfinder. Anyway, let's head to New Thassilon. Gate open! Hand out! We've arrived! Yes! Anyway, I've done a video on New Thassilon. Go check that one out first if you want to get a big out there. But we're going to be talking about a Runelord. Another one. Talked about one already. But what sources could you get in to know about her? These are my sources to a degree too. But also there's other places. But this gives you a good idea of her, of Thassilon, of her experience with there, and the other Runelords in general. These books here. Of course, Rise of the Runelords is the big one here. You go fight Karzog, you do it the first of the awakened, Runelords, you do a bunch of crap like there. Of course, that's a big one there. And then Return of the Runelords, it's another very important one that kind of deals with all this stuff. The last one here that I can kind of mention is another adventure path. In particular, the Dead Heart of Zin is a very big important one, for the Shattered Star one, because that deals with the Runelords as a group in that one. So those 4 adventure paths are where we get the picture of Sorshen and her fellow Runelords. But it's important to say the Runelord of Lust because, well, she was the only Runelord of Lust. This is Sorshen. And she was one of the 7 Runelords that ruled over Thassilon before Earthfall. Powerful wizards, masters of sin magic. She herself was Lust, the perversion of love by sin. She ruled over Eurythnia during the entire lifespan. So, she was one of the 2 Runelords that never got replaced. She ruled for 1,187 years, from negative 6480 AR to negative 5293, because 5293 was Earthfall. She was the master of enchantment, mind magic. Again, with schools of magic kind of being gone in the 2nd edition remaster, you can think of it more as master of mind magic and stuff like that. Her weapon of rule was a double-headed Gersame, and she had the sword of conviction of Aisha, the flaming longsword. We'll talk about her realm a little bit more before we end the day, but that gives you a basic idea of who she was. If we talk about, for old wizards, she would be an enchanter with a mythic ranks of trickster, 20 and 10 on that one. But again, wizard of some kind, master of mind magic, and human of Azlanti descent. She comes from Azlant. And that comes into what of her background we know. So when we talk about her history, again, we know that she's one of the 2 Runelords who ruled their domain for all of Thassilon. The other being Zendru. She was one of those that accompanied Zin when he was exiled for Azlant. And she was actually responsible for convincing Zin to delegate the rule of Thassilon onto the Runelords. Basically, when the Empire was growing too big, she's like, hey, we can take over for you. She was rewarded with the domain of Eurythnia and her original title, Runelord of Lust. She created the first rune, having discovered, studied, and first engineered the Everdawn, a powerful ancient artifact that she created these other artifacts from. She did share these secrets with the other Runelords, but she would come to regret that before, was she and the 6 other Runelords then eventually betrayed and assassinated Zin, felt infinite. And before Thassilon fell, she revealed the rune-walking ritual, basically removed Zuthra, but she didn't have a chance to use it for the end of Thassilon. So she developed a lot of very powerful magics. Very deadly ones. She prepared for Earth. The incoming destruction of Thassilon. she used her rune well to create the demi-plane, the Eye of Desire, where she could hide away from the cataclysm, in secret vaults guarded by clans of loyal vampires, deep beneath the capital of her realm, Zin Eurythnia. These vaults were an elaborate puzzle designed to siphon blood from exotic creatures that we used to slowly reawaken her, once the danger had passed. She didn't stir. She wouldn't, until Karzog's rune wall was activated in 4702, and only after Ilosa Arbasti used the Everdawn pool to bolster her power in 4708, in the Rise of the Rune Lords and Curse the Crimson Throne adventure packs. Let's for a minute talk about her domain. And this is an artifact, a road from Eurythnia. Now, we know her capital was in Eurythnia. We know this is a large realm. And it was a realm of lust and fertility. One of the 7 nations of Thassilon. It has become a new name in New Thassilon, I'll just note that now. We'll talk about the New Thassilon version of this. But this was the southernmost domain, with fertile lands, farms, sensual passions. Its main source of income was trade with foreign lands, and the people's lust for exotic lovers made it the only Thassilonian realm to import slaves from abroad. Particularly elves were brought in from far and wide to basically be samples in the brothels. Skadathi raids on the shipping were a regular headache for them, and eventually they took control of sea giants, enslaved them to protect their fleets. The imported spices meant they were famed for their cuisine. For all of its history, it was ruled by Sorshen. She was also an exile from Azlant. Her capital, Zin Eurythnia, is actually built in the same position where modern Korvosa now stands. Her tomb lies deep within the Grand Mastaba, the pyramid which Castle Korvosa was built. So yeah. This was the larger of New Thassilon's Anyway. So that was the old nation as we knew it. Now Earthfall. We're post Earthfall. What am I supposed to be picturing? I can check. Because, hey, we're not going to get scuffed about that. Ah, we can do that. Okay, yeah. Got you. Alright. So, she's awakened. What happened with Eolsa, the queen, what happened with Karzog, has awakened. She doesn't immediately return to the world. She basically takes her time and wants to reflect on what's going on. She watched as Karthog, Prune, and Sutha emerged and were defeated. And she basically had already been dissatisfied with the bickering the Rune Lords had. And she was actually bored of a lot of the cardinal pleasures and idle cruelty that she had. You know, as 1,000 years of lust can only last you so long when you change love to lust, you know? And she knew the world had changed. You know, she didn't want to be left behind. And she was also inspired by the former Demon Lord Noctula rise from the Outer Rifts during the events of, of course, the title is Wrath of Righteous. Yeah. She concluded that tyrannical rule of Thassilon could no longer work. The old ways were dead. She released her vampires from her service. If they continued to associate with them, more enemies. And finally, in 4718, she learned that Azlant, Alanzist, was meddling with time. She relocated the Everdawn pool into the Eye of Desire and created blood Siracrum of herself to serve as agents and oppose Azlantis, without having to put herself at risk. After the defeat, in the same year, she sought to rule New Thassilon peacefully, without having to war with its aggressors. She's one of the 2 surviving Rune Lords as it is, so 5 are now dead. She's one of the surviving ones. And she's one that, unfortunately, her fellow Rune Lord, which we'll talk about, has not given up her evil ways, but she now doesn't seek cruelty. She's changed in a lot of ways. Vanity was a big thing about her. So, we talk about her legacy. We can first talk about the monuments that are left behind from the ancient tanks. Her vanity was massive, as were many Runelords. They had images of themselves in mountains. But for her, a simple bust wasn't enough. She constructed enormous full-body statues of herself and placed them throughout her nation. She committed the construction of Lady's Light, a display of power, and as a place to stay where she and her agents were spying on the other fellow Runelords, which is the Lady's Light's enormous statue on the western end of Lady's Cape. So yeah, it still stands. It does. Many of these statues and monuments were destroyed by Earthfall. And there are little feet of these statues that can be seen in the southern districts of Varisia's city, Corvosa. Lady's Light's the big one that's intact. And it's the first thing that sailors see when they approach the shores of Varisia. So, she still has that left over. And now, of course, New Thassilon, with Eurythnia. Now, this was the realm that was ruled by former Runelord Sorshen. But she doesn't really involve herself with her subjects much. She and her benefactor, Nocturnla, basically seek to fashion it as a place where exiles, submissive ardents, and misfits can call home. She saw the death of her fellow Runelords, and basically what they did in the past in the modern world, and were like, this isn't going to work. The world doesn't have us anymore. So she's just been trying her peaceful coexistence. And Nocturnla has become kind of like a national religion, brine wall, a thriving port of travel between the line of literal kings of Varisia. So there's a lot of very big power and growth here in this arcane meritocracy that she's ruling over from her new capital of Zinjalast today. So, again, named in remembrance of old things. Now she's the new ruler of New Thassilon, but this is a legacy that she has now. Not the ancient monuments, that still some stand, very many. Not the old ruins from a realm lost nearly 10,000 years ago at this point in time. Yeah, probably around 10,000 years ago, actually. It really has been that long before she be local. 10,000 years. And she's seen that the world has changed. And she's doing her best to fit into this new world. A probably nigh immortal being, which is finding a new place. Maybe she did some really, well, I'm not going to say maybe. She did some really cruel and awful things in her life. Can she ever make up for those things? I don't know. She was the Runelord of Lust. She ruled over New Thassilon. Things happen. But nonetheless, she's a powerful being that has changed ways. So, I don't know. Take that as you will. Sorshen, Runelord of Lust, the only Runelord of Lust, one of the few remaining Runelords at all, is a mark on where Thassilon could have gone. Thassilon started out as virtues. She was the Runelord of Love. Could she ever have these virtues again? I don't know. She was lust. She fell to sin magic. Can you ever take steps back from sin? These are questions that cannot be answered. And, well, the crimes that she committed, they did happen 10,000 years ago. They're not fresh in anybody's minds. We can look and know how cruel and terrible they were. But they are ancient. And Earthfall wiped out much of that. There is no one that remembers these things. It does not mean they did not happen. But it makes for an interesting character. Someone who's trying to make a new way in a new world to them. Who's found someone that they can have at least kinship in this world. Those that she is trying to help out, trying to upload her fellow Runelord, Elmar's. Make sure that she maybe does better herself too. But nonetheless, finds a place in this movie. That's Sorshen. An interesting tale for Runelords. Certainly. Anyway, that'll be it for today. I hope you enjoyed diving into another of the Runelords. I will keep doing these because they're very interesting, and Sorshen, other than the, from what I've done so far, is a very interesting one. We talked about Karzan before. I'll keep doing these. They're very interesting. They're very interesting characters, and have very interesting history. And certainly, many of them relate to nowadays, since they all kind of reawakened. They all ended up getting killed, except for 2 of them, but they all did, so they all end up deep in storylines of what's going on in Pathfinder now. One awoke, so did they all do. Thassilon is almost influencing modern-day Golarion in a lot of ways. So, talking about them and learning about them is pretty interesting and important. So, I hope you enjoy. Alright, check out the rest of my stuff. Go check over things over on the YouTube side of things. That's where all tabletop stuff that I do ends up at. Whether I'm recording it over on Twitch, live, with people, or not, it ends up there. If you want to join me live, you always can. I do video games over there. I do video games with friends. I do live plays of TTRPGs. I do discussing tabletop Saturdays at 6. My kind of podcasty tabletop discussion where we talk about news of the week. Hey, Fall of Avonswell. That's a live play Pathfinder 2nd edition. We're doing the remaster. Playing it on Foundry. Just been starting up Wednesdays at 8. All the tabletop stuff, though, ends up on YouTube, so you don't always have to join me live. It'll just be nice. If you are joining on YouTube, do remember to give that support, like, subscribe, ring the bell, and let me know what you think about Sorshen. If you're having these adventures, like Return of the Runelords, Rise of the Runelords, any of these, let me know. And of course, too, check out my social media, Discord, Blue Sky, /Twitter. That gives you updates on my schedules, updates on what's going on, and life things. Anyway, I'm gonna go. I'm going to teach a little bit more, do some more things. Until next time, we dive into Golarion, or somewhere else, or whatever it is. I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.